A millionaire disguises himself as a beggar to test the kindness of a young sweet seller in traffic. The reflection in the executive bathroom mirror showed a man Gabriel Morrison barely recognized. His designer clothes and Rolex watch had been replaced by a faded t-shirt and shabby pants. 3 days of unshaven hair completed the transformation. His green eyes, normally bright and confident, now carried a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Mr. Morrison, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes. His assistant's voice echoed through the intercom. "Cancel everything," Gabriel replied, his voice firm. "I'm taking 2 weeks off." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. In 15 years at the head of Morrison Tech in Seattle, he had never taken more than 3 consecutive days off. But after the disaster of his last relationship with Victoria, who mysteriously disappeared after discovering that her shares in the company were temporarily frozen, Gabriel needed answers. He left the corporate building through the service exit, feeling the cold October air on his face. Seattle stretched out in front of him, a city he knew as a CEO, but would now explore from a completely different perspective. He had planned every detail. He would sleep in shelters, walk the streets, and observe how people really are when they believe there is nothing to gain. For the first few hours, people looked away. Some crossed the street when they saw him approaching. Gabriel experienced for the first time what it meant to be invisible in a city of millions. He walked to Pioneer Square, where groups of homeless people gathered near an old subway station. A gray-haired man, who introduced himself as Pete, offered him an old blanket. "First night on the street, kid?" asked Pete, his eyes revealing years of untold stories. "Is it that obvious?" Gabriel replied, accepting the blanket gratefully. "Your hands," Pete pointed. "They don't have the marks of the street yet." On the 3rd day of his social experiment, Gabriel found himself at a busy intersection near Pike Place Market. It was there that he saw her for the first time. Lily Anderson stood out not for her appearance, although her red hair in a messy bun and her gentle smile were memorable, but for her actions. She circulated among the cars stopped at the traffic lights, offering homemade brownies and small packages decorated with animal paws. What caught Gabriel's attention was the way she interacted with people. Her smile didn't diminish when she was rejected, and occasionally she would hand out a free treat to someone who seemed to be having a difficult day. "Would you like one?" she asked as she passed him, holding out a brownie. "You don't have to pay." "Why are you doing this?" Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse after days of speaking little. Lily sat down next to him on the sidewalk, ignoring the stares of passers-by. "Every penny goes to the animal shelter on Madison Street. I started after I found a litter of abandoned kittens 2 years ago. I couldn't just ignore it." Her brown eyes sparkled as she spoke of the animals, and Gabriel realized that there was no trace of falsehood in her words. She continued selling her sweets over the next few days, and always stopped to chat with him, sharing stories about the rescued animals and her dreams of expanding the shelter. One afternoon, when the rain began to fall heavily, Lily insisted that he accompany her to the shelter. "No one should be out in this weather," she said, her determination leaving no room for refusal. The shelter was small but welcoming, with dozens of rescued animals. Gabriel watched as she cared for each of them with dedication, even after a long day at work. In between jobs, she would tell him about her life. How she gave up a promising career in marketing to devote herself to animals, the sleepless nights caring for sick puppies, the struggles to keep the place running. It was during these conversations that Gabriel felt something he hadn't experienced for a long time, a genuine connection. There was no pretense in Lily's actions, no hidden interest. She was simply who she was, a woman who found her purpose in helping those who couldn't help themselves. As the days passed, Gabriel found himself looking forward to seeing her, to hearing her stories, to sharing simple moments that, in his previous life, he would never have treasured. But with every sincere smile, every gesture of kindness, the guilt over his lie grew. One evening, while helping Lily feed the animals, she commented, "You know, you're different from the others I've met on the streets. There's something in your eyes, a different depth." Gabriel felt his heart squeeze. The truth threatened to escape his lips, but the fear of losing that unique connection kept him silent. How would she react to discovering that all this time he had been a billionaire CEO in disguise? How could he explain that his lie was born out of a desperate desire to find something real in a world of appearances? Watching Lily lull a newly rescued kitten, Gabriel realized that he had found what he was looking for, but at the same time created an even greater dilemma. His social experiment had turned into something much deeper and more complicated. He was hopelessly in love with someone he knew only to be his most vulnerable and honest self, but built on a fundamental lie. The night progressed, and with it grew the certainty that he would soon have to make a choice. Continue living the lie that had brought him closer to Lily, or risk losing everything by revealing his true identity. The weight of this decision consumed him, while the soft sound of the cats purring and Lily's peaceful breathing filled the silence of the shelter. During the second week of his experiment, Gabriel began to notice nuances in Lily's life that he hadn't noticed at first. She would arrive at the traffic lights at precisely 7 in the morning, carrying a thermal basket full of still warm sweets. Her hands, although delicate, bore small scars, marks of her dedication to rescuing animals in precarious situations. "I haven't been able to sleep properly since we brought in that injured pit bull," Lily confided one morning, offering him a coffee she had bought on the corner. "Max, that's what I called him, was used in fights. He's so scared that he cringes when someone raises their voice." Gabriel watched as she bit her lower lip when talking about the dog, a gesture he had already learned to associate with genuine concern. With each story shared, he felt even more drawn to her authenticity, at the same time as the weight of his own lie became more suffocating. One afternoon, while he was helping Lily organize the donations of food at the shelter, a man in a suit entered the premises. The landlord's lawyer had some bad news. The rent was going up by 50% next month. "We can't afford that," Lily muttered after the man left, dropping into an old chair. "We can barely cover our current expenses." Gabriel felt his heart squeeze. With a single phone call, he could solve all the shelter's financial problems. But doing so would mean revealing his true identity, and the fear of losing the connection they had built paralyzed him. "Let's think of something," he said, his hoarse voice betraying his own frustration. "Maybe we could organize a charity event." Lily's face lit up at the suggestion. Over the next few days, they planned an adoption fair combined with a special candy sale. Gabriel used his business knowledge, disguised as tips he had learned in his previous jobs, to help her organize the event. The fair would take place next weekend in a small park near the shelter. Lily spent late nights preparing a wider variety of sweets, while Gabriel helped spread posters around the neighborhood. Seeing her enthusiasm and determination only intensified his feelings for her. During these preparations, Gabriel got to know Lily's story better. She had grown up in a middle-class family in Portland, studied marketing at the local university, and was about to accept a position at a large agency when she came across that first litter of abandoned kittens. "My parents thought I'd gone crazy when I turned down the job," she said while decorating cupcakes for the fair. "But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I wanted to do." Gabriel understood this feeling perfectly. Despite his professional success, only now, living this simple, purposeful life alongside Lily, did he feel truly fulfilled. The day before the fair brought an unexpected surprise. Pete, the homeless man who had given Gabriel his blanket on his first day on the streets, showed up at the shelter. His eyes widened as he recognized Gabriel, and an enigmatic smile formed on his wrinkled face. "So this is where you've been spending your time," said Pete, his voice low enough for only Gabriel to hear. Gabriel's initial panic was replaced by relief when he realized that Pete had no intention of exposing him. Instead, he offered to help with the fair, showing surprising skill with animals. "Sometimes the streets teach us more about compassion than any university," Pete commented, while playing with one of the cats. The night before the fair, Lily invited Gabriel to help her with the final preparations. The shelter was silent, except for the occasional meow or bark. While they were organizing the tables and decorations, their hands accidentally touched, sending an electric current throughout their bodies. "You know," Lily began, her eyes meeting his in the soft late afternoon light, "I never thought I'd find someone who understood so well what I'm trying to do here." Gabriel felt his heart race. Her closeness, the soft scent of vanilla that always accompanied her sweets, the sincerity in her voice. All of it made him want to reveal the truth right then and there. "Lily, he began, but was interrupted by the sound of his cell phone, the old one, not the smartphone he kept hidden, ringing. It was Pete, telling him that some volunteers had confirmed their presence to help out at the fair. The moment passed, but the tension remained. Gabriel knew he couldn't go on with this farce for much longer. The fair the next day could be his last chance to prove that his feelings for Lily were true, regardless of her real identity. As the evening progressed and they finalized their preparations, Gabriel made a silent promise to himself. After the fair, he would reveal the whole truth. The fear of losing Lily was still there, but the prospect of building something real with her, based on honesty, was beginning to outweigh it. What Gabriel didn't know was that fate had other plans for the revelation of his true identity, and they would unfold in a way he could never have predicted. The morning of the fair dawned with a soft Seattle drizzle, but not even the gray weather could dampen Lily's enthusiasm. The small park next to the shelter had been transformed into a welcoming space, with colorful tents protecting the candy tables and designated areas for the animals available for adoption. Gabriel was helping to position the last banners when he spotted a familiar figure crossing the park. His blood ran cold as he recognized Marcus Chen, one of the directors of Morrison Tech, walking towards him. Before he could hide, their gazes met, and Gabriel saw the exact moment when recognition dawned on Marcus' face. "Morrison? What the hell?" Marcus began, but Gabriel quickly pulled him behind one of the tents. "Marcus, please, I can explain," Gabriel whispered nervously. "But not here, not now." The principal looked at Gabriel's shabby clothes, at his unshaven beard, and then at Lily, who was happily arranging the brownies on a nearby table. "It's because of her, isn't it?" Marcus asked, his voice softer. "The sweets girl. I've been passing her for weeks on my way to the office." Gabriel nodded, feeling the weight of his choices more than ever. "I need you to keep this a secret, just for today. Please." Something in Gabriel's pleading tone must have touched Marcus, because he agreed with a discreet nod. "You have 24 hours, boss. After that, the council will want answers." As Marcus walked away, Gabriel felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. It was Lily, her brown eyes shining with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost," she asked. "Just nervous about the fair," Gabriel lied, hating every false word that came out of his mouth. The fair began to fill up as the morning progressed. Pete coordinated a group of volunteers with surprising efficiency, while Lily alternated between selling her sweets and presenting the animals to potential adopters. Gabriel watched everything with a mixture of pride and apprehension, knowing that his time was running out. Around midday, a local reporter showed up to do a story on the event. Gabriel tried to stay in the shadows, but his heart almost stopped when the camera pointed in his direction during an interview with Lily. "And who is this dedicated volunteer who has been helping you?" asked the reporter. "That's Gabriel," Lily replied, smiling. "He's been a blessing to the shelter over the last few weeks." The irony of the situation didn't escape Gabriel. In a few hours, this story would probably be replaced by headlines about the eccentric CEO of Morrison Tech living undercover on the streets. In the afternoon, while helping a family with the adoption paperwork for a golden retriever, Gabriel noticed Lily chatting animatedly with an elegant lady who seemed interested in making a substantial donation to the shelter. It warmed his heart to see how Lily could touch people with her sincerity and dedication. "You really love her, don't you?" Pete asked, silently appearing at her side. "I can see it in the way you look at her." "More than I thought possible," Gabriel admitted. "And that's why I need to tell you the truth today." Pete put a hand on his shoulder. "You know, son, on the streets I learned that the truth doesn't always hurt as much as the fear of it." When the sun began to set, the fair had been an absolute success. 5 dogs and 7 cats had found new homes, and the sales of sweets had exceeded all expectations. Lily was overjoyed, hugging each volunteer in gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said to Gabriel, her eyes watering with happiness. "You came into my life like a guardian angel." It was at that moment that Gabriel saw the first notifications popping up on the cell phones of the people around him. The story about the fair had aired, and someone had already recognized the dedicated volunteer as the missing CEO of Morrison Tech. "Lily," Gabriel began, his voice trembling, "I need to tell you something." But before he could continue, a group of reporters burst into the park, cameras flashing and questions being fired from all sides. "Mr. Morrison, why did you abandon your company? Is it true that you're living on the streets? What is the nature of your involvement with this shelter?" Gabriel watched Lily's face change from shock to confusion, and finally to something that broke his heart: betrayal. "Morrison," she whispered, taking a step back. "As in Morrison Tech? Have you been lying all this time?" "Lily, please let me explain," Gabriel begged, trying to reach her, but she pulled away. "I thought you were different." Her voice was choked. "I thought I'd finally found someone who understood, who truly cared. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? A social experiment? A form of entertainment for a bored billionaire?" Her words hit him like physical blows. Pete tried to intervene, explaining that he had known Gabriel's true nature from the beginning, but Lily was already walking away, lost in the confusion of reporters and onlookers who now crowded the park. Gabriel stood still, feeling his world crumble, as camera flashes captured the moment his cover, and possibly his only chance of true love, came to an end. The storm of flashes and questions continued as Gabriel watched Lily's silhouette disappear into the crowd. Pete tried to create a barrier between him and the reporters, but the damage had already been done. Social networks were exploding with photos and videos of the Beggar CEO. Some were already calling him. "Mr. Morrison, this way," shouted Marcus, who had returned to the park. He and two Morrison Tech security guards made their way through the crowd, escorting Gabriel to a black SUV parked nearby. Once inside the vehicle, the silence was deafening. Gabriel looked out of the tinted window, seeing the chaos he had left behind. The charity event, which was supposed to be a day of hope for the shelter, had turned into a media circus. "Your phone won't stop ringing," said Marcus, handing Gabriel a smartphone he had kept on him during his 2-week experiment. "The board is panicking. The shares have fallen 3% in the last few hours alone." But Gabriel was barely listening. His thoughts were fixed on the expression of betrayal on Lily's face. In his attempt to find something genuine, he had hurt the most sincere person he had ever met. "Take me to the shelter," Gabriel ordered, his voice firm. "Are you crazy?" protested Marcus. "We need to make a press release. Calm down the investors." "The shelter first," insisted Gabriel. "Then I'll take care of the company." When they arrived, they found the place surrounded by reporters. Pete was at the door, blocking the entrance like an unlikely guardian. Gabriel entered through the back, finding Lily sitting on the floor, cuddled up to Max, the rescued pit bull. "Please leave," she said without looking at him. "Not before you listen to me," Gabriel replied, keeping his distance but firm in his position. "You deserve to know the whole truth." Over the next hour, Gabriel told her everything. His failed relationships based on interest, his disillusionment with people's deceit, his impulsive decision to test the humanity of people living on the streets. He confessed how his plans changed the moment he met her, how her genuine kindness made him question everything he had become. "When I realized I was falling in love with you, the fear of losing what we had stopped me from telling you the truth," Gabriel admitted. "For the first time in years, I wasn't the CEO of Morrison Tech. I was just a man discovering what really matters in life." Lily finally looked at him, her eyes red from crying. "How can I believe anything you say now?" "Because despite the lie about who I was, everything we shared was real," Gabriel replied. "Every moment in the shelter, every conversation, every laugh. I was myself, truer than I've ever been in my life." Just then, Pete entered the shelter, followed by several people who had taken part in the fair. "Lily, you need to see this," said Pete, showing his cell phone. On the screen, a viral video showed Gabriel, still in disguise, stopping an angry driver from kicking a street dog weeks earlier. Another video showed him sharing his blanket with an elderly man during a cold night. Photos of him helping out at the shelter, interacting with the animals, always when he thought no one was watching. "He may have lied about his name," said Pete, "but never about his heart." Lily picked up her own cell phone, watching social media explode with stories about the CEO with a heart of gold. People shared encounters with Gabriel during his 2 weeks on the streets, each story revealing small acts of kindness he performed without seeking recognition. "Why continue living on the streets after meeting me?" asked Lily, her voice softer. You could have revealed who you were at any time. Because for the first time in my life, someone liked me for who I was, not for what I had, replied Gabriel. And I wanted to be worthy of that love. Marcus, who had entered silently, snorted. Sorry to interrupt, but we need a decision on how to proceed with the press. Gabriel looked at Lily, then at the animals in the shelter, and finally had an idea. What if we turned this story into something bigger than ourselves? He proposed. The shelter needs help, and now we have the attention of all of Seattle. Over the next few hours, Gabriel worked with his PR team to turn the scandal into a campaign to raise awareness about animal abandonment and the importance of shelters like Lily's. Morrison Tech announced a program to raise awareness. Morrison Tech announced a matching donations program. For every dollar donated to the shelter, the company would donate the same amount. I'm not doing this just to make amends, Gabriel explained to Lily. As they watched the first donations start to come in, I want to prove that people can change, that they can find purpose beyond money and status. Lily stroked Max, who, for the first time since his rescue, had allowed someone other than herself to get close. Gabriel, it will take time to fully trust you again, she said finally. But maybe we can start from scratch. No lies this time. That's all I ask, Gabriel replied, taking a seat next to her on the floor of the shelter. As night fell over Seattle, the Madison Street Animal Shelter became the epicenter of a story that captured the city's imagination. A story about second chances, not only for abandoned animals, but also for a man who had to lose himself in order to finally find himself. The morning after the revelation brought with it a different Seattle for Gabriel Morrison. The same buildings and streets he had seen from his rooftop now bore the memories of his 2 weeks living as a homeless man. The experience had changed his perspective irrevocably. Sitting in his office at Morrison Tech for the first time in weeks, Gabriel watched the headlines on the various monitors. CEO in disguise, social experiment, or love story. Morrison Tech announces revolutionary animal shelter support program, the billionaire who chose the streets. Donations have already exceeded $500,000, Marcus informed us, entering the room with a folder of reports. The matching program is generating more engagement than we expected. Gabriel nodded, but his thoughts were on the Madison Street shelter. It had been 3 days since the revelation, and although Lily had agreed to give him a chance to explain himself, the distance between them was palpable. The messages they exchanged were cordial, but devoid of the intimacy they had built up. I canceled your afternoon meetings, Marcus continued. I thought you might like to attend the delivery of the new equipment to the shelter in person. The news took Gabriel by surprise. What equipment? The ones you approved yesterday? Surgical table, veterinary equipment, new heating system. Marcus smiled. Or was it Pete who approved all this using his login? Gabriel couldn't help but smile. The night before, he had spent hours with Pete planning improvements to the shelter, and the former homeless man had turned out to be a surprisingly astute strategist. At 2 in the afternoon, Gabriel arrived at the shelter driving his own pickup truck, a conscious change from his usual luxury cars. The place looked different. Volunteers were painting the outside walls, while a professional team was installing new windows. Lily was supervising the arrival of the veterinary equipment, her red hair tied up in a messy ponytail, just like the day he met her. When she saw him, she hesitated for a moment before approaching. This is all? A lot, she said, gesturing to the improvements in progress. Actually, it was Pete's idea, Gabriel replied, keeping a respectful distance. He knows the real needs of the shelter better than any consultant I could hire. The mention of Pete's name softened Lily's expression. The former homeless man had become a bridge between them, someone who knew both Gabriel from the streets and the CEO, and could vouch for the authenticity of both. Max asked for you, Lily commented, surprising Gabriel. He stares at the door every time someone comes in. It was the first time she had mentioned anything personal since the revelation. Gabriel felt his heart racing, but he maintained the professional composure he had practiced. Can I see him? He asked, trying not to sound too anxious. Lily led him to the kennel where Max was. The pit bull, who had previously cringed at the presence of strangers, approached the bars wagging his tail at the sight of Gabriel. He always knew who you really were, murmured Lily, observing the interaction. Animals have that gift. While Gabriel stroked Max through the bars, Lily shared the news about the recent adoptions. The unexpected publicity had brought in dozens of people interested in adopting, and each animal found a home after a rigorous assessment. "I'm still angry with you," she said suddenly, her voice soft but firm. "Not for the lie about who you were, but for not trusting me enough to tell the truth." Gabriel turned to her, meeting her eyes for the first time that day. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Every day it got harder to find the right moment. I was afraid that by revealing who I was, you would only see the CEO and not the man I learned to be at your side." Lily crossed her arms, a defensive posture Gabriel already knew well. "And who are you really, Gabriel Morrison?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Gabriel looked at his own hands, the marks of the streets almost gone, but the lessons learned permanently engraved on his soul. "I'm someone who had to lose everything to find what really matters," he replied. "Someone who learned more about humanity in 2 weeks on the streets than in 35 years of privilege. And I'm someone who, for the first time in my life, is completely in love, not with an idea or an image, but with a real woman, with all her strength and vulnerability." A tear ran down Lily's cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple." Gabriel took a step towards her. "It's scary and complicated, and I'll probably make more mistakes. But if you're willing, I'd like to try and do it right this time. No disguises, no lies." Before Lily could reply, Pete entered the kennel, carrying a box of donations. "Oh, sorry to interrupt," he said with a knowing smile. "But I thought you might like to know that we've just had a call from Channel 5. They want to do a special on the shelter." Lily and Gabriel looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. There was work to be done, lives to be saved, trust to be rebuilt. The road ahead would not be easy, but perhaps that made it all the more valuable. "I think we need more brownies," Lily finally said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Would you like to help me in the kitchen? Like old times?" It was a small step, but for Gabriel, it represented all the hope in the world. "I'd be honored," he replied, his heart lighter than it had been in days. As they made their way to the shelter's kitchen, the sound of barking and meowing in the background, Gabriel realized that sometimes you have to lose your way to find true north. And sometimes, the truest love is born not from perfect moments, but from the imperfections that make us human. A week after revealing his identity, Gabriel found himself dividing his time between Morrison Tech and the shelter with a new routine that was far from conventional. Mornings were dedicated to video conferences and corporate decisions, while afternoons found him with his sleeves rolled up, helping with the renovations at the shelter. "The board isn't very happy with your new flexible schedule," Marcus commented during a morning meeting. "But the company's shares are up 12% since the story broke. Apparently, a CEO with a social conscience is good for business." Gabriel was barely listening, focused on a proposal he had spent the night developing. A corporate program that encouraged employees to do volunteer work at animal shelters, with hours paid for by the company. "We need to expand this beyond Seattle," he said, running his hands through his now well-groomed hair. "Imagine the impact if other companies adopted the model." In the shelter, the changes were visible. The freshly painted walls displayed colorful murals of paws and snouts, courtesy of local volunteer artists. The new veterinary wing was almost ready, equipped with state-of-the-art technology. But the most significant change was less tangible. It was the energy of the place, vibrant with hope and possibilities. Lily continued to keep a professional distance, but Gabriel noticed small signs of closeness. A coffee left on his desk when he arrived early to help, a discreet smile when he managed to get Max to perform a new trick, comments about the animals that went beyond what was strictly necessary. "She still watches you when you're not looking," Pete commented one afternoon as they helped set up new kennels. "The same way you do when she's distracted," Gabriel sighed, tightening a screw more firmly than necessary. "I don't want to put pressure on her. She needs time." "Time is good," agreed Pete. "But sometimes people need a little push to get out of the safe place." The opportunity for that little push came unexpectedly. A heavy storm hit Seattle that night, and the shelter received an emergency call about a family of cats trapped in a culvert. Gabriel was in his office when he received Lily's message asking for help. Without hesitating, He grabbed his pickup and drove to the location indicated, finding Lily already soaking wet, trying to reach the kittens. "The mother is hurt," she shouted over the noise of the rain. "I can't reach her." Without a second thought, Gabriel took off his jacket and lay down on the wet asphalt, extending his arm through the narrow gap in the manhole. The icy water dripped down his face as he tried to reach the frightened animals. After 40 tense minutes, they managed to rescue the entire feline family. Drenched and shivering, they put the cats in the car and drove back to the shelter. "You're shivering," observed Gabriel, turning the heater on full blast. "You too," replied Lily, and for the first time in days, her tone was light, almost playful. At the shelter, after settling the rescued cats in and drying off, they sat down in the small kitchen with cups of hot chocolate. The silence between them was different, more comfortable, like old times. "Why did you really decide to live on the streets?" asked Lily suddenly. "The whole truth this time." Gabriel rotated the cup between his hands, choosing his words carefully. "I was lost. I had everything money could buy, but I felt empty. Every relationship felt like a business transaction disguised as love. And now, he met her eyes. Now I know exactly what I want, and it has nothing to do with money or status." Lily looked away, but not before Gabriel noticed the blush on her cheeks. "People are talking, you know? They say it's all an elaborate marketing strategy." "Let them talk," Gabriel replied. "The only opinion I care about is yours." A high-pitched meow interrupted the moment. It was one of the rescued kittens, which had escaped from its box. Lily gently picked it up, and Gabriel watched as her fingers gently stroked the animal's wet fur. "You've changed," she finally said. "Not just in the way you look or talk. It's something deeper." "You've changed me," Gabriel replied simply. "Or rather, you helped me find who I really am." The puppy purred between them, creating an invisible bridge that lessened the emotional distance of the last few weeks. Lily looked up, meeting Gabriel's gaze with an intensity he hadn't seen since before the revelation. "I still don't trust you completely," she admitted, "but I want to try. Not for the CEO of Morrison Tech, but for the man who rescued cats in the rain without a second thought." Gabriel felt his heart racing, but kept his voice calm. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance to prove that the man you met on the street and the man sitting here now are the same person." The moment was interrupted by Pete, who entered the kitchen carrying dry towels. His knowing smile suggested that he had overheard part of the conversation. "The kittens are warm and fed," he informed us. "And it looks like you two are finally thawing out too." Lily laughed, a sound Gabriel had missed in recent weeks. It was a small step, but a significant one. As that night's rescue had proved, sometimes the biggest changes start with a simple act of courage, whether it's diving into the rain for a few cats or opening your heart to a second chance. Morrison Tech was buzzing with a different kind of energy that Thursday morning. Staff whispered in the corridors as Gabriel led an unusual group through the main lobby. Lily, Pete, and 3 teenagers who used to help out at the shelter as volunteers. "And this is where we're going to set up the training center," Gabriel explained, indicating a large space on the first floor. "Young people will be able to learn about technology while getting involved with social causes." The Tech for Good project was his newest initiative, a program that combined technological education with social responsibility. Teenagers from the shelter would be the first to benefit, receiving mentoring from the company's engineers while developing solutions for non-profit organizations. "This is incredible," Lily murmured, watching the youngsters' bright eyes as Gabriel showed them the equipment that would be installed. Over the last 2 weeks, since the night of the cat rescue in the rain, she had begun to see a different side to him. Not just the businessman or the man on the street, but someone who genuinely wanted to make a difference. Pete, who had become a sort of unofficial advisor to both of them, smiled discreetly as he noticed the way Lily followed Gabriel's every move. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters," he commented, low enough for only Lily to hear. The visit to the company was just part of a bigger day. Gabriel had organized an adoption event in the park near Morrison Tech, where employees could meet the animals from the shelter during their lunch break. The idea came about after he realized how many of his employees lived alone in apartments, immersed only in their work. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus called out, approaching with a tablet. The Wall Street Journal is on the line. They want to do a story on the company's transformation. Gabriel looked at Lily, as if asking permission. She nodded slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. Over the last few days, they had developed this silent communication, a delicate dance between the professional and the personal. As Gabriel walked away to take the call, Lily watched the staff moving around. Many had already visited the shelter in recent weeks, volunteering or making donations. Her CEO's story had triggered a wave of compassion that was spreading throughout the company. "He's really changing things," commented one of the teenagers, Tommy, who dreamed of becoming a programmer. "Not just in the shelter, but, in people's heads." Lily couldn't help but agree. The transformation went beyond the physical improvements to the shelter or the new social programs. It was a change in mentality, reconnection with humanity in an increasingly digital and distant world. The adoption event in the park exceeded all expectations. Morrison Tech employees filled the venue during their lunch break, many bringing their families. Gabriel, still wearing his suit but with his sleeves rolled up, helped introduce the animals, telling their stories with the same enthusiasm he used to present financial reports. "This here is Max," he explained to a young engineer, introducing the pit bull that had made so much progress. "He taught us that sometimes we need to give people and animals a second chance to show who they really are." Lily, organizing the adoption forms, felt her heart race when she heard these words. She knew they weren't just directed at Max. Gabriel had the gift of turning every interaction into an opportunity for genuine connection, something she now realized had been present even during his undercover days. During a break in the event, as the staff returned to their posts, Gabriel approached Lily with 2 coffees in hand, a black, as she liked it. "Thank you," she said, accepting the drink. Their fingers touched briefly, sending that familiar electric current through them both. "This is all. More than I could have imagined." "It's still not enough," Gabriel replied, his gaze lost in the Seattle skyline. "I want to do more, not just for the shelter, but for all the causes that need attention. And I want to do it right this time, without masks or disguises." Lily studied his profile for a moment, noticing the small changes in his posture. The way his shoulders seemed more relaxed even though he was wearing an expensive suit, how his eyes had retained that humility acquired on the streets. "Perhaps," she began, choosing her words carefully, "you could tell me more about your plans over dinner?" Gabriel turned to her, surprise and hope mixed in his gaze. "Dinner? Yes, that meal people share in the evening," she joked, feeling her own cheeks flush. "This time with no disguises, no surprises. Just the 2 of us, being who we really are." A genuine smile lit up Gabriel's face, that same smile that had first captured Lily's attention on the street, when he had nothing but his humanity to offer. "I'd love to," he replied simply. Pete, who apparently had the gift of appearing at the most significant moments, approached with Max by the collar. "I think someone wants to join in the celebration," he said, as the pit bull wagged his tail excitedly at them both. The moment was interrupted by Marcus announcing that the next batch of employees was arriving to meet the animals. As they went back to work, Gabriel and Lily exchanged one last look full of unspoken promises. The afternoon continued to be busy, but there was something different in the air. A sense of possibility, of new beginnings. Masks had fallen, truths had been revealed, and what remained was the chance to build something real, based not on appearances or expectations, but on who they truly were. And maybe, thought Lily as she watched Gabriel playing with a group of puppies, sometimes the truest love comes not when you find someone perfect, but when you find someone perfectly imperfect, willing to grow and change alongside you. The restaurant chosen for dinner was not at all what Lily had expected. Instead of a luxurious establishment in downtown Seattle, Gabriel took her to a small Italian bistro in the Ballard neighborhood, a cozy place where the chef greeted customers by name and pictures of adopted dogs and cats decorated one of the walls. "Antonio is one of the shelter's biggest donors," Gabriel explained as they were led to a discreet table in the back. "He started donating the leftover food years ago, long before I came along." Lily noted how Gabriel looked perfectly at ease there, wearing jeans and a casual shirt, a significant change from the CEO who used to appear in business magazines. The last few weeks had left subtle but permanent marks on him. "You've really changed," she commented, after taking their orders. "It's not just a facade or a marketing strategy." Gabriel played with his napkin, a nervous gesture that Lily recognized from the days when he pretended to be homeless. "Do you know what scared me the most during those 2 weeks? It wasn't sleeping in the cold or hunger. It was realizing how I had become exactly the kind of person I had always despised." The conversation was briefly interrupted when Antonio personally brought a bottle of wine, insisting that it was courtesy of the house. After he walked away, Gabriel continued, "Every person who passed me in the street, looking away. I used to be like that, too busy, too important to notice who needed help." Lily took a sip of wine, allowing the silence to stretch for a moment. "And now? Now I understand that success has nothing to do with the balance in your bank account," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "It's about the impact we make on people's lives. You taught me that." Dinner progressed with a different intimacy than the one they had shared before. It was no longer the shelter volunteer and the dedicated animal protector, but two people discovering each other without masks or pretenses. "How's Max?" asked Gabriel, genuinely interested in the pit bull that had become a symbol of his own journey of transformation. "Getting better every day," replied Lily, her eyes shining. "Yesterday, he let a child pet him for the first time. It reminded me of you, you know? How sometimes we just need someone to believe in us." Dessert, homemade tiramisu, arrived accompanied by yet another surprise. Antonio brought photos of his newest family member, one of the cats rescued on the night of the storm. "Luna," he introduced proudly. "My wife says she's brought new light into our home." After dinner, they decided to walk around the neighborhood. The night was surprisingly clear for Seattle, with stars visible between the occasional clouds. They stopped in a small park, where the distant sound of the harbor created a soft urban melody. "I have a confession to make," said Gabriel, turning to Lily. "Even before I revealed my identity, I had already earmarked part of Morrison Tech's shares for an animal protection foundation. It wasn't just for you or the shelter. It was because I'd finally found a purpose greater than myself." Lily felt her defenses, carefully maintained over the last few weeks, begin to crumble. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I wanted you to know that I'm not doing this to impress or redeem myself. It's who I've become, thanks to you." A cold wind blew in from the sea, making Lily shiver slightly. Without hesitation, Gabriel took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, a gesture reminiscent of his nights at the shelter when he was still just Gabriel the volunteer. "You know what Pete said to me the other day?" commented Lily, adjusting her coat. "That sometimes the universe makes us go through detours to find the right path." Gabriel smiled, remembering the wisdom of the former homeless man who had become an unlikely mentor to them both. "Pete has this gift of seeing through people. He saw right through you from the start," agreed Lily. "Maybe that's why he never exposed you." The moment was interrupted by Lily's cell phone. An emergency at the shelter. One of the recently rescued puppies had a high fever. "Let's go," said Gabriel immediately, grabbing his car keys. "I know a vet who takes care of emergencies." During the drive to the shelter, Lily observed how Gabriel naturally alternated between the efficient businessman, making calls to ensure immediate veterinary care, and the compassionate man he had met on the streets. "It's funny," she commented as they waited for the vet. "Before, I thought I'd met two different versions of you. Now I realize that maybe, for the first time, you're being completely yourself." Gabriel took her hand, a simple gesture but loaded with meaning. "I just had to lose myself completely to find myself." The puppy was medicated and soon showed signs of improvement. As they watched the little animal fall asleep, Gabriel and Lily stood side by side, their hands still intertwined, feeling that perhaps a few detours along the way are necessary to get us exactly where we need to be. The evening that began as a simple dinner had turned into yet another chapter in their shared history. A history that, as they were discovering, was only just beginning. A week after the dinner at the Italian bistro, Morrison Tech was unrecognizable. The main lobby, once stark and corporate, now displayed a photographic exhibition entitled Second Chances, powerful images of rescued animals alongside their new owners, many of them employees of the company. Gabriel was watching the transformation from his desk on the top floor when Marcus rushed in with the Wall Street Journal in hand. "You need to see this," he said, holding out the paper. The headline read, "From the penthouse to the streets, how one CEO revolutionized corporate culture." "They're calling it the Morrison effect," Marcus explained. "Other companies are starting to implement programs similar to ours. It's a movement." Gabriel smiled, remembering a conversation with Pete weeks ago, when the former homeless man had prophesied that sometimes a small stone can cause bigger waves than we imagine. His phone vibrated, a message from Lily with a photo of Max playing with children during an animal-assisted therapy session at the local children's hospital. The project, a partnership between the shelter and Morrison Tech's fledgling foundation, was transforming lives in ways even he hadn't anticipated. "Cancel my next meeting," Gabriel told Marcus. "I need to be at the hospital in an hour." Arriving at Seattle Children's Hospital, Gabriel encountered a scene that warmed his heart. Lily, wearing a white coat with printed paws, was coordinating a group of volunteers while Max, patient and gentle, was letting children undergoing cancer treatment stroke his fur. "Who would have thought that scared dog would become a therapist?" commented Lily when she saw him, her eyes shining with pride. "He just needed someone who could see beyond appearances," replied Gabriel, exchanging a meaningful glance with her. "Like all of us." The therapy session was interrupted by a small commotion in the corridor. Pete had arrived with 2 new recruits for the program, an elderly golden retriever and a 3-legged cat, both recently rescued. "I found these guys near the old station," Pete explained. "I thought they deserved a second chance, like everyone else." Gabriel observed how the children welcomed the new animals without any prejudice or hesitation. For them, the animals' imperfections were not defects, but characteristics that made them special. "You know," said Lily as they organized the materials after the session, "I never imagined that day at the traffic light would change my life so much." "Neither did I," admitted Gabriel. "I was so focused on testing the character of others that I didn't realize I was about to discover my own." The conversation was interrupted by one of the nurses, who came in to report that the animal visits had significantly increased the patient's recovery rates. The news only strengthened Gabriel's conviction that they were on the right track. Back at the shelter that evening, Gabriel was helping Lily feed the animals when a young family walked in. The father, wearing a Morrison Tech uniform, was bringing his young daughter to meet the kittens. "Mr. Morrison?" The employee seemed surprised to see his CEO feeding the kittens. We came after seeing the exhibition in the lobby." Gabriel smiled, recognizing the man as one of the junior programmers. "Mark, right? From the development department?" The fact that Gabriel knew his name made the employee's eyes widen. His little daughter was already enamored with a black kitten, the same one Gabriel had helped rescue weeks ago. "Her name is Luna," Lily explained, noticing the little girl's interest. "She was found on a stormy night." As the family filled in the adoption forms, Gabriel realized that his life had been transformed in ways that all his money couldn't have bought. The satisfaction of seeing a family form, of witnessing the moment when an animal finds its forever home, was incomparable. "You look different," Lily commented after the family had left. "Lighter, more yourself." "It's because I've finally understood that I don't have to be 2 different people," Gabriel replied. "The CEO and the man you met on the street can coexist." Pete, who apparently had a gift for appearing at the most significant moments, entered bringing coffee for everyone. "You know what they say on the street," he commented with his enigmatic smile, "that sometimes we need to lose our direction to find our true north." Gabriel's cell phone rang, yet another emergency, this time a group of abandoned dogs in need of immediate rescue. Without hesitation, he and Lily prepared for another night mission. "We're a good team, aren't we?" commented Lily as they drove through the illuminated city. Gabriel looked at her, remembering how it all began. A lost man trying to find truth in a world of appearances, and a woman whose genuine kindness had changed his life forever. "The best," he replied, taking her free hand on the console of the car. The night stretched into yet another successful rescue, more lives transformed, more stories of redemption being written, and as they worked side by side, Gabriel and Lily continued to discover that sometimes the truest love doesn't need disguises or grand gestures. It just needs hearts that are willing to grow and change together. Pete watched everything with his wise smile, as if he had known from the start that this story, which began with a lie, would end with the most profound of truths, that a person's true value lies not in what they possess, but in the impact they have on the lives of others. Morrison Tech's headquarters shone under the Seattle fall sun, but it wasn't the imposing building that caught the eye of passers-by. In the large garden in front of the company, a temporary structure had been set up, decorated with flowers and ribbons. Dozens of white chairs formed a central aisle, and at the back, a simple altar awaited the bride and groom. It was Gabriel and Lily's wedding day, and they had decided to hold the ceremony in the place where their lives had been transformed. Morrison Tech's garden, once a simple decorative space, now housed a small sanctuary for rescued animals, one of the many changes implemented in the last year. "Nervous?" asked Pete, adjusting Gabriel's tie. The former homeless man, now director of the Morrison Foundation's social welfare program, had become much more than a mentor. He was the best man at the wedding. "Not for the first time in my life," replied Gabriel, watching the guests arrive. Company employees mingled with volunteers from the shelter, creating a unique atmosphere of celebration. Max, the pit bull who had become a symbol of transformation, was elegantly dressed in a bow tie, carrying the rings on a small cushion attached to his necklace. His transformation from frightened dog to certified canine therapist mirrored Gabriel's own journey. "Remember the day we met?" Pete smiled, reminiscing. "You were as lost as the animals Lily rescues?" Gabriel nodded, remembering that first night on the streets, when Pete offered him an old blanket and, without knowing it, began his journey of transformation. Sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to find ourselves. In the room that had been improvised as the bride's dressing room, Lily was adjusting her simple but elegant dress. She had chosen a model that would allow her to move around comfortably. After all, you never knew when an emergency rescue might happen, even on your own wedding day. "Something tells me you're going to revolutionize the concept of a honeymoon," joked Marcus, who had become a close friend of the couple, handing Lily her bouquet, a delicate arrangement that included small photos of the first animals she and Gabriel had rescued together. The music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but an acoustic version of "Rescue Me," a choice that drew knowing smiles from the guests. Lily walked down the aisle, escorted by Antonio, the Italian chef who had become a father figure to her after the loss of her parents. Gabriel felt his heart race at the sight of her, not because of her dress or her makeup, but because of the genuine smile that had first captured his attention at the traffic lights a year ago. The same smile that had taught him the true meaning of love and purpose. The ceremony was conducted by a judge who was also a volunteer at the shelter. The vows, written by themselves, reflected their unique journey. "Lily," Gabriel began, his voice firm but emotional. "When I decided to live on the streets, I was looking for the truth in others, but you taught me to find the truth in myself. I promised never to wear masks again, never to hide who I really am. I promised to be your partner in every rescue, in every moment of joy, and in every challenge." Lily wiped away a tear before beginning her vows. "Gabriel, you came into my life disguised as someone with nothing, but you gave me everything, not for your money or your position, but for your heart. I promise to always see beyond appearances, to always believe in the power of transformation, and to always be by your side, whether it's rescuing an animal or transforming the corporate world." Max, perfectly trained, approached with the rings. The moment drew emotional sighs from the guests, especially those who knew his story. After the exchange of rings, the judge barely had time to pronounce them husband and wife before a commotion broke out at the back of the garden. A group of volunteers had arrived with a newly rescued puppy, found abandoned near the company. To no one's surprise, Lily and Gabriel interrupted their first dance as a married couple to help with the rescue. Still in their wedding outfits, they worked together to stabilize the frightened puppy, demonstrating in practice the meaning of their vows. "That's so them," commented Pete, smiling as he watched the scene. The reception continued outdoors, with food trucks replacing the traditional buffet, including the candy trailer where it all began. Each table told the story of a rescued animal, and the centerpieces were donation boxes for different animal causes. As the sun began to set, Gabriel and Lily took to the small stage for a special announcement. The Morrison Anderson Foundation for Animal Protection would be expanded nationally, with rescue centers and animal-assisted therapy programs in various cities. Because sometimes, said Gabriel, looking lovingly at his now wife, it takes a special person to show us that success is not measured by numbers in a bank account, but by the number of lives we transform. The party continued into the night, a celebration not just of the love between two people, but of all the transformations that love had inspired. Morrison Tech employees discussed future social projects with volunteers from the shelter, while children played with the therapy dogs in the illuminated garden. At the end of the evening, as the last guests said their goodbyes, Gabriel and Lily stood hugging each other, watching their expanded family, humans and animals, celebrating together. "So, Mrs. Morrison Anderson," Gabriel whispered, "ready for our non-traditional honeymoon?" Lily smiled, knowing that they would be leaving the next morning not for a paradise beach, but to help implement the Foundation's first rescue center in Portland. "With you," she replied. "I'm ready for any adventure." Max approached the couple, wagging his tail, still elegant in his bow tie. Pete, watching the scene from a distance, smiled with satisfaction. Sometimes, he thought, fate has curious ways of bringing people together, even if it needs a little disguise to begin with. The evening ended as their story had begun, not with grandeur or ostentation, but with the simplicity of two hearts that had found their true purpose in each other.